Top of the morning, everybody. Welcome to another Monday Fun Day here on GoJo and Golic. You know who's having a lot of fun? This dude, Saquon Barkley. Another record-setting night for the Eagles running back, where he is in the MVP conversation. The good, the bad, and the ugly around college football, because we had chaos from coast to coast, and the young and the restless, some young rookies showing promise. Bo Nix looks like a legit quarterback, baby. Buckle up. 2 hours of the good stuff coming at you.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Emerson Latzia mustached up with us on a Monday. We're presented by Campbell's Chunky, the soup that eats like a meal, and we have a great show for you today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on the DraftKings Network. Marshall Newhouse going to be with us to preview Monday Night Football at the top of the second hour, go through everything that we saw this NFL weekend. At some point, we're going to have to get Emerson's review. He's the only one of us that's seen the Wicked movie so far, and it seems like that is blowing up right now. I'm getting my tickets to go see it on Wednesday. Emerson, you're a changed man already, it sounds like here. You're play guy now.
I left there a different human being. I have a glow to me this morning. I am defying gravity, as some would say. Yes, I'm a musical guy now. I'm a Broadway guy. I'm a 3-hour movie guy. I'm telling you, my life has changed over the last 12 hours since I got out of that movie.
I haven't heard one bad review. I mean, everybody just talks so highly of it. They say, and again, it's part one, and it was 2 hours and 40 minutes. But Emerson, everybody says you don't even realize it's 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Dude,
that's how good the movie is.
I was glued the entire time to the screen. I was mashing popcorn and my Diet Coke, and there wasn't one time I was thinking, what time is it? This movie's been going on forever, because it had my full attention. And I absolutely love singing and music now.
That is amazing, because I feel like the part about it being part one of two parts was not widely publicized. And I had friends that found out getting to the theater that, oh, this is part one, because it sounds like it very clearly ends with that to be continued vibe to it. So I do feel like they should have made that more, because if I'm investing 2 hours and 40 minutes of my time, which I understand in 2024 is kind of par for the course, but that's still a significant chunk of my day. I at least need to feel like I'm going to get some closure, or know that I'm not going to get it going into that movie. Did you know, Emerson?
Yeah, I was told, I was warned by my buddy Brandon, who is very big into Broadway, who I went to the movie with. He said, this is going to be a long one. I don't know if it's going to be super action-packed like the movies you like. This was my first time going to the theater since before the pandemic. And I said, if I'm going to go, it is for Wicked, and it was one of the best decisions I have ever made.
There had to be, Mike, a marketing reason of why they didn't pub a second part. And I'm not a marketing person to know, but I'm sure there was intent with not really letting, for lack of a better term, the cat out of the bag until close to the release of this.
And there are some interesting nuggets throughout this film as well. I think we kind of all know the end game here and how it's going to end. Okay, spoiler alert, Wizard of Oz came out like a century ago, but it was emotional, And it was about 20 minutes in, my friend Brandon reached for a napkin and was drying tears coming down his face. I almost cried.
Okay.
Twice in that movie. Almost cried.
Almost.
All right.
Almost.
So you got emotional 20 minutes into Wicked, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to be comfortable with. I'd imagine about 20 minutes into Sunday Night Football last night, there were Giants fans emotional watching what they watched from Saquon Barkley. So why don't we get to that? Because last night, Jesus Christ, we've got a lot of NFL to get to, but 37-20, the Eagles beat the Rams, and Saquon Barkley goes off, 255 yards on the ground for a guy that's starting to build an MVP case now. But, Dad, as we on one hand have the Giants waking up this morning with half their team calling them soft and indicting the coaching staff in the post-game locker room, the clip from your favorite Hard Knocks this offseason just ringing in the back of my head of them discussing what would happen if they let Saquon Barkley go, and then he goes to a division rival. And as this kind of season right on now, where he's on pace to break the single-season rushing record, has to be the absolute worst version of this they could have possibly imagined.
Oh, I mean, watching that show, they were thinking about bringing in another quarterback for Daniel Jones, and they didn't. They stayed pat, now cut Daniel Jones. They let Barkley go for reasons that I don't know. He wouldn't have been the difference of the team this year, but he wouldn't have cost them a ton, cap percentage-wise. And he goes to the Eagles. It could not be going worse for the Giants and could not be going better for the Eagles as they're staying healthy on defense, Mike, and the rushing game. I mean, the five-headed monster, but they didn't have Devontae Smith last night, of Brown, of Jalen, of Saquon, of Goddard, and then throw Smith in there when he's healthy. And that offensive line, when they're healthy, I mean, this is a very, very formidable offense.
That was the difference to me in the entire game. If we're assessing like what happened last night and why, the Eagles completely out-physicaled the Los Angeles Rams. A Rams team that, by the way, remember, the book on them going back to last year was Sean McVay wanted to reimagine this team as a downhill, ground-and-pound football team. They had invested plenty of draft picks and offseason money into the offensive line. They had put, we know, in the last couple of years, a ton of draft picks into that young defensive line that's still one of the best pass-rushing units, if not statistically the best in terms of pressuring the quarterback. But when it came to getting after people downhill the way the Rams want to do, that's what the Eagles are doing right now. And we're going to talk a lot about Saquon Barkley, as we should. But, Dad, that Eagles offensive line is one of the best, I believe, second best in the NFL in terms of yards before contact per rush on this season, behind only the Baltimore Ravens. They were paving some holes that you and I could have run through here. I saw Lindsey Theory posted the note from ESPN that Saquon Barkley had 213 rush yards before contact in the game last night, the most by any player since Jerome Harrison back in 2009, according to ESPN stats and info. And so this Rams defensive front that's young and great, and I think has tons of good football in front of them, but more inclined to rush the passer than stop the run, got absolutely bullied up front by this group. And the same was true for the Eagles defense on the other side.
Well, like I said, because I've been part of teams that have obviously stopped the run, but then got run on. And it is the worst way you can lose a game when you get run on. It is just horrific. And when you run for 314 yards, the Eagles rush for?
Yes.
300. I mean, again, that's college-like. When you get pushed around, you're not supposed to get pushed around like that on the professional level. Not that much. Air yards is one thing, but rushing yards where it's the physicality, the top big physical players on both sides of the line matching up, you're not supposed to be able to run like that. And Mike, 213 yards before contact, that's all offensive line. That's just staying on your man. Defensively, that's trading one for one. That's getting blocked and not getting off your blocker. That's the job of a defensive lineman. Get your hands on the old lineman. Even if you get pushed back a little, get off the block to make the tackle. They were not getting off the block. Saquon was going to the second and third level before he was getting touched, and that just rolls up on you and just defeats you physically and mentally. That was an absolute physical beatdown. And you're right, a young defensive line that's very promising for the Rams. It really is, but they got handled big time last night.
I do think it's funny, too. The entire Eagles scouting department plan seems to be, let's find the biggest, fastest dudes that we can, because A.J. Brown went over 100 yards in this game, and every time you saw him catch a ball on the second level, it looked like he was triple the size of the nearest defender for the Rams on the back end here. This Eagles team is just a giant group of ass kickers. On defense for the Eagles, I saw Nakobe Dean, who has finally looked like the guy that they drafted out of Georgia.
Yes.
Like all the college people that saw them get him as a steal in the I think the second or third round they drafted him in, but everyone who had watched him in college were like, this dude's awesome. You're going to love this. And the first couple of seasons didn't necessarily go like that. I have not seen someone go hammer to nail on Kyron Williams as a pass protector like Nakobe Dean did early in that game against him last night. And Jalen Carter up front, who is right now tied for second in the NFL. We talked about quick quarterback pressures with Greg Rousseau from Buffalo among defensive tackles in terms of getting to the quarterback in under 2.5 seconds. Jalen Carter's behind only Chris Jones right now in the NFL. So this dude was a bat out of hell. Even if it didn't translate into sacks for him, Dad, we saw for the rest of that defensive line, because he drew so much attention in a way that, quite honestly, the Rams and Aaron Donald were so used to for so long. He's now that dude, Jalen Carter, for Philadelphia, and it completely changes the math for that defensive front that was dominant last night.
5 sacks, 11 quarterback hits that they had on Stafford and beat up that offensive line, which for the Rams is a beat-up offensive line, by the way. Still have some guys out, still getting some guys back. But you mentioned about Jalen Carter, and that's why it's always not about stats, especially for an interior defensive lineman. We talked about Dexter Lawrence for the Giants having all the sacks, and obviously that shows well. But Jalen Carter had 1 tackle last night. But that in no way, shape, or form dictates or tells you the story of his impact on the game. He plays on the other side of the ball. He plays on the other side of the line of scrimmage. He wreaks absolute havoc. He is an absolute train wreck going forward that just reestablishes the offensive line. So listen, they got guys back in that linebacker crew like Nakobe Dean. They spent some money. They got some rookie DBs that are obviously playing well. I mean, you're playing against Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, and Nacua started out with some catches early on in this game. I mean, it's a formidable offense with those two and Kyron Williams. And this was a one-score game with what, 10 minutes to go in the third quarter. It was 20-14. And then it was boom, 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 out go the lights, touchdown, field goal, touchdown for Philly. All of a sudden, it's 37-14. They scored their last touchdown with about 3 minutes to go, and it's game over. But the game was literally a one-score game with 10 minutes to go in the third quarter, and then Philly just put it away. Barkley had 2 70-plus yard runs, including one right the first play of the second half, and then he had another one, a 72-yard run in the fourth quarter. So Emerson, I mean, they just controlled the clock, the ball, the score in the third and fourth quarter.
We talked about it on this show last week, gentlemen, just how incredible Saquon Barkley is in the second half. He's averaging 76.2 rushing yards per second half this season. That's on pace for the most on record. Like Gojo, if you just took his yards in the third and fourth quarters this year, he'd have the 4th highest rushing yards in the league with 920. Just second half alone.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that as a theme for both him and Derrick Henry, who continue to be the story of this season. We know Saquon Barkley, right now the NFL's leading rusher. Derrick Henry's going to have his chance as a rebuttal coming up tonight in the Harbaugh Bowl. But it's the combination of these great players, and both of these guys, we talked about the ways they ended up in the right situation with groups and offenses that were able to pave the way. The Eagles' offensive line a little bit more settled than the Ravens was coming into this week or this season, but also quarterbacks who are a viable run threat. Now, Lamar, infinitely more than Jalen Hurts at this point, who, even going back to the 2022 season, Jalen Hurts not as fleet of foot and certainly not as down in, down out effective a part of their run game, but still enough to be able to hold the backside of this. And so, Dad, this is one of those games where we've been trying to handicap who's a real contender in the NFC for the last few weeks, and the Eagles have been vaulted into that conversation outside of the Detroit Lions. Yeah. They seem to be the team that people trusted the most, and all last last night did was reward and reinforce why. Even in a game where, Nick Sirianni's going to come out of this memed again, because how about in the, I think it was the third or the fourth quarter, when Nick Sirianni, there's a penalty down in the red zone, the Rams are driving, there's a penalty on third down. Nick Sirianni originally, it appears, we thought declined the penalty, so it was going to be fourth and short. The Rams trot their offense out there and are going to get ready to go for it. And then all of a sudden, Nick Sirianni's apparently changing it with the refs and now wants to accept the penalty and make them go for the third and long there. The booth was aghast by it, as was I, Dad. You weren't calling this game last night, so you didn't get to react live, but that's when I'm going to need an explanation from the league, because for everyone at home, it looked like Nick Sirianni made one decision, saw that Sean McVay was going to do the thing and go for it, and then realized, oh, I don't want that, and got to make another in a way that should not be allowed.
Yeah, you shouldn't get a do-over on your decision once a decision's made. It was pretty wild. But going back to what you said about the NFC, it's clearly Detroit and Philadelphia, right? And then there's a line, and then you fill in the next slots. Is it Minnesota and Green Bay probably? We'll talk about the NFC West, which nobody wants to win at this point. We still don't give the NFC South much due. So I think it's clearly Detroit and Philadelphia ending up on a collision course.
Yep, that's certainly what it seems to be. So not all great news for Philadelphia last night, though, unfortunately. You saw Brandon Graham go out in the middle of that game now, and waiting to see, do we have the report anywhere? Oh, yeah, here we go from the NFL. Brandon Graham tore his tricep, going to miss the rest of the season, unfortunately. So, the long-time tenured pass rusher for Philadelphia that was harassing, Matthew Stafford last night. Yes. It wasn't like this is a guy on his last leg and a huge vocal leader in that locker room. Certainly a tough one there, but the youth on this defense has stepped up. And you're right, Dad. It is them in Detroit in a tier all their own in the NFC right now. But Emerson, we got to talk about the MVP now with Saquon Barkley, too, because after last night, forget just Offensive Player of the Year, the stakes are up higher for him.
Yeah, they certainly are. And it's been 12 years now since a running back has won MVP. That was Adrian Peterson. And Sean McVay had some high praise here for Saquon, guys, after that last night and that performance last evening, which is last night.
I'll have to go back and look at it, but, it's the thing that makes him so dangerous, Jordan, is that you get him the ability to get to the second level unabated, and he gets enough speed, and he's excellent. He's as good as there is as a slash runner to be able to work edges and then be able to erase angles and be able to finish, and that's why he had the production that he had, and that's why he's had, arguably an MVP type of season so far.
And GoJo, last time a running back was MVP without 2,000 rushing yards in a season or breaking an NFL single season touchdown record, that was Emmitt Smith in '93. So, this guy's just got to keep chugging along if he wants a chance.
Yeah, and Dad, he's going to have a chance right now. There's no doubt. He's done all the things that someone playing a position not named quarterback has to do the incredible, eye-popping stats on a trajectory for record-setting rushing totals. It's very similar, quite honestly, to what we saw in college with Ashton Genty and how he announced his Heisman candidacy earlier in the season, chasing Barry Sanders' rushing record for a while, being on pace for that, and giving us some jaw-dropping, eye-popping highlights like the reverse hurdle that's going to live in infamy for Saquon Barkley. So I think he absolutely deserves to be in the conversation, Dad, whether or not a guy who doesn't touch the ball every play, since Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, the two guys that are in front of him right now, according to the odds at DraftKings Sportsbook, do. I don't know if he's going to be able to pull it off, but he deserves to be involved in the conversation, and I'm glad we're having it.
Well, he does, and a lot of it is going to be based on, just like the Heisman that Travis Hunter is the favorite for, it's based on a quarterback not going off and having an ungodly year, even though Cam Ward is having a heck of a year. So it's the same thing here. Quite honestly, Lamar Jackson is on pace to outdo his stats last year. So, I mean, but Saquon is on pace to get over 2,100 yards rushing. So that throws a wrench into the quarterback situation. But Lamar was the MVP last year. They're one of the top teams, even though behind Pittsburgh right now. And the quarterback is looking to have better stats, throwing yards. He already has more touchdowns than last year and more rushing yards than last year.
He does. I think this could be one of those areas where maybe it's fatigue that sets in. We've seen Lamar Jackson be great already. Saquon Barkley, this was what the talent always promised us, but when unfortunately his tenure with the Giants because of injury and because of that organization could never deliver on here. And so now getting to see this in the light of day, again, hug the Giants fans in your life and make sure they're okay today. Coming up next, though, maybe talk to an NFC West fan in your life, too. Does anyone want to win this division? We break that down and more in Mic'd Up Monday next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Time for Mic'd Up Monday. We got a contender edition right now, gentlemen. And the first topic of discussion is going to be which team is in more trouble after this weekend? Houston, Washington, or San Francisco? Let's start off with some Dan Quinn sounds, shall we?
My view, I thought, what a wild special teams moment of block punts, kicks, kickoff returns, block field goals, just a number of things, going to that spot. I thought defensively, the team played well on third down into that spot to go, so I was pleased to see some of that. But just, not enough plays for us, third downs offensively to really win it.
Yeah, that game against the Cowboys, GoJo, that was one of the wildest, final few minutes of a game I think I have ever seen.
Yeah, the last 3 minutes of that game, including 4 touchdowns, you had special teams touchdowns mixed in there, a game that ultimately at least felt like the door slammed because of a mixed extra point that would have tied the game at the end. Dad, it had everything. My biggest question coming off of this, because for Washington, as we have a contenders look at this thing with some of the teams that lost, San Francisco, Houston, Washington, who after the start of their season got thrust into this, it is a good reminder that they are still rebuilding this on the fly and that this is a team with so many new and young parts. But to me, it was more about the Cowboys. Like, even at a time of the year where maybe Cowboys fans had reconciled the fact that we're now playing for the draft, the Cowboys can't even appear to do that right as they try to get towards tank mode. No Zach Martin, no Tyler Smith in this game. They were down plenty of stars all across the board, and it didn't matter. Trevon Diggs on defense, Jake Ferguson out in this game, and they go and pull one off as now the race towards the bottom is something that they're thwarting as well.
Listen, we sit there and talk about tanking, and we can talk about the Giants and putting in DeVito instead of Locke. But it's never the players. It's not the players that do the tanking. The players apply and play. The players play hard, and it does show. I think Washington now is on a 3-game slide. It does show that maybe they were a year early. But listen, they're still in great position to make the playoffs. But and they lose Brian Robinson, the running back in this game. That certainly hurt them. As you mentioned, a plethora of players out for the Cowboys. But the Cowboys, they have pride and they're going to play hard. And this is one of those where that a lot of people go get a soda or go get a beer or something when a special teams play is going on. This was one of the most special team induced games that we've seen. Dallas had a blocked punt. Dallas had a punt blocked, a field goal blocked, and Brandon Aubrey missed a field goal. Washington had 2 missed field goals, a kickoff return for a touchdown that they gave up at the end, and a missed extra point. I mean, it was amazing what went on in the special teams, but the cheering had barely died down on the long touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin, 86 yards, to when the extra point was missed. I mean, by Seibert. I mean, that was the cheering had barely stopped, and I think. It was Greg Olsen, I think, on the game and said, just hold on, they got to make the extra point. I think it was Greg Olsen. I'm not positive. And sure enough, Seibert yanks the extra point. That was just unbelievable.
Could not imagine the dejections there. To your point about how unique this was, Dad, Cowboys-Commanders was the first game in the Super Bowl era to have 2 missed extra points, 2 kickoff return touchdowns, and a blocked punt, because we had the kickoff return touchdown on the onside kick that ensued after that mixed extra point. So it was a uniquely, freakishly bad game, and one where on one side, yes, you're right, Dad, the players went out there and fought like they did against Houston. This Dallas roster showing a lot of pride in what they do in a lost season. But for fans, it's got to be frustrating, because at this point, you are just kind of hoping, if we're going to be bad, let's be super bad and get a nice draft pick. On the other side, if you're the Commanders, I don't know if we talked about Jaden Daniels looking injured last week and that curbing some of the performance. Late season, Cliff Kingsbury is going to be on trial as we go forward here, but this was a game you had to win. You were 10.5-point favorites, and if you wanted to be taken seriously for anything other than getting to the postseason or being in the conversation, this is one you've got to win. And so Washington downgraded a bit in the way that we look at things, I think, going forward here until further notice.
Did you ever see a touchdown where the team scoring the touchdown, the players and coaches did not cheer? Well, you saw it at the end of the game when Washington had the onside kick. They're now down a point with, I think, 14 or 20-some seconds to go, and they onside kick it, and Wanye Thomas is the middle guy on the return team, and he scoops it, and he runs and he scores. And you saw players mad, coaches mad that he scored, because it still left Washington 1 score away with time for a Hail Mary, of which they did get a Hail Mary off. And we've seen Hail Marys work before. So Wanye Thomas certainly should have slid down. He should have just downed it. They could have downed the ball. But dude was feeling it, man, and he was going to the end zone, and he was going to have his moment. That had to be amazing. He turned around, got to the sidelines, and like everybody was chastising him.
Yeah, I'm supposed to lay down for the team. Man, what team is apparently what was coming out of his mouth in that moment in time. So Washington downgraded as contenders. Dallas showing great fight. Emerson, let's move on to another head-scratcher from this weekend. The Will Levis Titans getting a dub.
Yeah, for sure. I think the difference between the Texans and Commanders is Washington's recent losses are indeed proving to be a little more costly. Houston recorded 8 sacks on defense and still lost 2. Will Levis, roll the tape.
We've been talking all week about how this is for, the whole organization. Obviously, with the history and background, this means a whole lot to Miss Amy, so this one's for her.
Talk about this defense. They have shown up for you guys all season. Today was no exception. How impressed are you by them?
Yeah, heck yeah. I mean, just dudes stepping up, filling in and playing up to and filling the shoes of the guys that are there before them. So
I don't know, Gojo. Texans 7-5. While they're not in danger of losing the AFC South yet, they're certainly not playing like a team that can be a factor in the postseason.
No, they're not. Compromised on the lines of scrimmage. Both sides of the ball, really. They can rush the hell out of the passer, but they got moved up front on defense, Dad, and on offense still can't protect C.J. Stroud very well. Again, it was Will Levis that got sacked 8 times in this game. Houston Texans setting that franchise record. But outside of that, you saw a team that really still is struggling to get anything going. Nico Collins, there were big plays mixed in there. It wasn't like it was an abject disaster, but this is a team that's broken up front and has been all season right now, and they paid for it finally yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game where Tennessee was able to run the ball. Pollard had over 100 yards, and Joe Mixon, who had been like one of the big surprises of like Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon. We put Mixon in with them as far as what he had helped the team do. He had 14 carries and 22 yards. I mean, they had, 40 yards rushing total. So they couldn't run the ball. Tennessee was able to run the ball. Houston, as far as a division, like you said, Emerson, they're not going to lose the division. They're 2 games up on the Colts. It would be one hell of a collapse. But they won it last year, and they're looking to improve upon what they did, and they can't find the answer right now. They got Nico Collins back. That certainly helps. He had 5 catches for almost 100 yards and a touchdown. But this defense they got controlled with the run.
Yeah, if you're looking at a team right now in Houston that on the other side, in terms of quarterback pressure allowed by this offense, the Houston Texans are 3rd behind only the Patriots and the Titans, who they sacked 8 times in this game. And Dad, they were ones we expected to be Super Bowl contenders this season. And if I'm looking around the rest of the AFC and saying, all right, how's this going to go if you've got to face Buffalo's pass rush, the Steelers, the Kansas City Chiefs and Chris Jones, any of the teams involved, Baltimore Ravens, who have been, as of late, getting to the quarterback a little bit better in the back half of this season, I don't feel great about any of those matchups for the Houston Texans. So like you said, secure in that division, but that's ultimately one that I don't think is going to impress me enough to say this team has the chance to live up to the lofty expectations that we set for them before the season. And we know injury was a huge part of that, being without Nico Collins as long as they were. Certainly seeing Stephon Diggs go down here, but the offensive line and their failure to properly address that position over the course of this year and find that right group, I think ultimately going to be the thing that's undone them. So they're another one right now in the AFC. I do not take them seriously as a Super Bowl contender based on what we've seen for a while, even though we know they're going to be in the postseason. So, Emerson, that just leaves one more here. The San Francisco 49ers, a mash unit this weekend, getting absolutely drubbed in Green Bay.
Yeah, they did. They didn't have Brock Purdy, didn't have Nick Bosa, did not have Trent Williams, and the Packers absolutely took advantage. Josh Jacobs, 3 touchdowns on the ground, rushed for 106 yards. Packers scored 21 points off 3 takeaways. Take a listen to Matt LaFleur as he's gushing over his running back's performance.
You know that number 8 out there? Did you see how many tackles or how many people he made him miss? It was pretty impressive. I think early on that got us going. And we thought we could hit him with some of the downhill stuff. Obviously, they're missing a key part to that defense. 2 starters actually, and so but I thought we did what we had to do.
Packers now 8-3, Gojo, and the 49ers dropping to 5-6 now in the season.
Yeah, the 49ers have not won back-to-back games yet so far this year. Now, we know with this one, and you and I, when we talked about this game on Friday, this was before the Brock Purdy news where he was out in this game. Star pass rusher Nick Bosa was out in this game. You were dealing with Trent Williams out with an ankle injury in this game. So 3 of the tent poles of your organization gone for this game, and it showed. Brandon Allen at quarterback, under duress a fair amount of the night and just not able to get it done. Plenty of mistakes and blame to go around, and Kyle Shanahan understandably disgusted. But, Dad, it's pretty late in the season for me to expect some massive turnaround from a team in San Francisco who, George Kittle came back and made some big plays, but he's been beat up for most of this season. I have to constantly worry about that too. So it just seems like this team is officially too beat up to party for 2024, and we're going to, I think, sunset the conversation about them getting back as the NFC representative for the Super Bowl officially.
Yeah, now certainly they can still take the NFC. It's 2 teams at 6-5 and 2 teams at 5-6. So that is an up for grabs without question division. But to think that anybody in that division can make a run, especially with the way Detroit, Philadelphia, Green Bay, Minnesota are playing, is hard fought. I mean, they had 5 fumbles. They only lost 2 of them, but they fumbled 5 times. Brandon Allen had an interception. He did have a touchdown, but Josh Jacobs ran the ball well, over 100 yards, over 4 yards a carry. And we talk about teams that have mash units. Every year there's mash units, but there's usually one that supersedes everybody else. There have been 32 players that have missed at least one game for the 49ers. 32. So that's at least missing one game. That's nicked up, not 100% for other games, and they just can't get everybody healthy and back together. And they won't, because Brandon Ayuk is out for the year. But again, all teams deal with injuries, but some more than others. And I'm with you. They may win the division, but as far as them being the threat in the NFC, I think that's gone.
Yeah, if someone adds up the salary cap dollars that have been lost to injury over the course of this year, I mean, Christian McCaffrey missing as much of the year he has. Everyone we named is a household name player that the 49ers have had on the shelf and now have to worry about that recurring for the rest of the season. In a division, like you said, Dad, how would you organize the NFC West right now? We got the win yesterday. San Francisco wins 2 straight in the division, gets a big one over the Cardinals that had been ahead of them right now, harasses Kyler Murray. I mean, Leonard Williams is somewhere still probably touching up Kyler Murray even after that game was over. They looked great along the lines of scrimmage yesterday. Is Seattle the best team in the NFC West? Are we just going to keep round-robining it like this after every week?
I'm surprised at the Rams, because the Rams, outside of the old line, which still has some health issues, they have all their power on offense from quarterback to running back to 2 wide receivers. And we keep talking about that young defensive line, how much they put pressure on the quarterback, but they just got so smoked last night that I keep thinking they're going to, because the 49ers are down, I keep thinking the Rams are going to establish themselves. And when they haven't, I thought, well, then it's going to be the Cardinals. And I kind of put the Seahawks off. And look at now the Seahawks. So I actually think it's between Seattle and Arizona, both sitting at 6-5, though in the division, Seahawks are 2-2, Arizona's 2-1. I still kind of think the Rams as an outside chance, but I don't think any of those teams are going to make any noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's stranger things have happened in the NFC West, remind you, is that long ago, 7-9 Seattle made the postseason against everyone's best wishes and managed to win a game. So they've all got the ability, because there's great quarterbacks in this division, but it is as chaotic as any in football, because the NFC just can never be normal. And as has been often said, the Seattle Seahawks have never in their history, shout out to Kevin Clark, played a normal game. Coming up next, though, let's talk about maybe the new normal around a couple of young star quarterbacks in the NFL. Next on GoJo and Golic.
All right, everybody, back here on GoJo and Golic. If you haven't been paying attention, that's totally fine. It was a crazy NFL Sunday, Week 12, and young quarterback showing some promise, starting in Chicago, where, yes, a fifth straight loss for the Bears, but Caleb Williams making some progress here. Let's hear from the number 1 overall pick, working with his new offensive coordinator.
When it gets to 2 minute, and like today, end of the game, before OT, it's just, now it's time to go be Superman and go do all those different things that I can do. But throughout the game, play the game the right way, make adjustments, all these different things, throw hot, make the right reads, play within the offense. And then when it's time to be Superman, it's kind of what he tells me. That is what he tells me in the headset. Go be Superman at the end of the day.
What did we think?
Hey, man, it's working. Like, they have simplified the equation and emboldened Caleb to be Caleb, which it felt like Daddy was trying to fight the urge, because I'm sure he's heard everything that people have said about his style of play from college to the NFL and how he takes too many risks, and can you pull that stuff off at this level? And we saw within the body of this game, they got this to overtime against a Vikings team that I thought might overwhelm them, and Caleb Williams tried to do too much in overtime, took a big sack, and it ends up being part of the reason they lose this game. And so there's still a fine-tuning that has to go on, but we saw some of those vintage Caleb Williams plays in a game where he threw for over 300 yards and gave this team a chance to win.
So, again, it started with too high of expectations, in my opinion, that everybody had for the Bears, because they saw Caleb early on and said, wow, look at the weapons around him. Look at what Ryan Poles got around him. The GM, the defense was good. This team is going to have a meteoric rise. It's a rookie quarterback, okay? There are going to be mistakes, and there were mistakes, but hasn't thrown an interception in 5 games? So that even precluded the new offensive coordinator playing. So what he's talking about was, if there's a time to be Superman, that's right. Right now, it's get the ball out of your hands. Get the ball out of your hands in a timely fashion, get it to one of your playmakers, and don't try and play hero ball during the game. Do the reads, throw the ball. See receiver, throw ball. They simplified it for him, and that's what needed to be done, because he has a growing curve that you can't live in the playground. You can't just run around and make plays and everybody go ooh and ah, when you have to be able to play from the pocket first. And that's what he's learning now, and that's what he's doing well. Again, he hasn't thrown an interception in 5 games. That's a credit to him for sure, especially with the scrambling around that he's done. But he's got to be refined. He's got to be kind of harnessed in a little bit to take care of the pocket first, make the throws from the pocket, and then when you have to create, and as he said, play hero ball or Superman ball, then you play it. But he's still going to get you, it's still going to get you into trouble. Even though he did it in overtime, held onto the ball, kept running backwards, got sacked. I mean, that was a horrible play. But again, he's a rookie learning, trying to get out, trying to play hero ball, and it didn't work.
I would rather go down and have a few blemishes early on with a guy trying to be Superman when most other guys don't even own the cape. Like, that to me is the difference. There are plenty of players that don't even have that club in their bag when it comes to being able to break glass, make plays on their own, do that hurdle play over the defender before he ultimately goes and makes the completion for the third down conversion that most guys don't even have the ability to do. Caleb, it's going to take a while to figure out, hey, the speed and the way that this goes. Honestly, not all that dissimilar like Caitlin Clark. Like what we saw her going into the WNBA originally. Took a while for the height, speed, the physicality, all those things to sort of catch up and figure out the new angles of how to go out there and be yourself. But Dad, to your point, it's not like he did this risk-averse style of play, going low and slow. He was 26 of 33 on passes attempted under air yards, but 6 of 13 for 156 yards, over 10 air yards. He was ripping balls down the seam to Keenan Allen and the rest of these wide receivers who finally have to feel like this is the version of their quarterback they were expecting to get all along.
Listen, you have a rookie quarterback not throwing interceptions. That's a monster check mark. A monster check mark, because that's usually the biggest thing is they take sacks and throw interceptions. Now, he's gotten sacked, some of it his fault, some of it the O-line's fault, but he hasn't thrown interceptions. And I agree with you. I would much rather tell a player you got to pull back then give me more. You don't have to tell Caleb to give you more. He is going to give you everything to the point of making that mistake and getting sacked in overtime. But that's okay. You can correct that. But again, I think this is all, Mike, based on the expectations were set too high for what this team looked like early on with Caleb. Now, the team may get there at some point. We'll see if it's with this coaching staff or not, or if they're going to want an offensive guy to help bring along Caleb. But he has certainly looked good. Again, 5 games, no interceptions. Last 2 games of getting the ball out. He looks like a regular pocket quarterback who can make plays with his legs. And that's what you want to do. Again, even the running quarterbacks, the Lamar Jacksons, they make plays in the pocket. The running is icing on the cake. And that's what Caleb has to learn. Sometimes you have to eat the ball and take a sack, but take a sack right away. Don't run around and lose 20 more yards and take a sack. But again, as I said, I'd rather tell a guy to pull back than say, give me more. So I still like the direction he is going. And I just think too high of expectations were put on the team.
Yeah, I think the rest of the roster and the coaching staff were pretty flawed. I think we're seeing right now that stuff matters. There's a reason they're getting ready to make these changes, because you've got an incredibly talented player that I think was getting a little bit of paralysis through analysis at the beginning of his tenure. And now we're starting to, I mean, this is back-to-back games. In this game, he actually led the team in rushing, which is bad because it was in the 30s of yards in that running back room. But last game, just 70 yards rushing, and was a yard away from being the leading rusher, as they were, again, within 1 score of beating a division opponent with Green Bay and the Vikings back-to-back. I think that's the other part of this. Is this was against the Minnesota Vikings defense, that vaunted Brian Flores defense that's supposed to be nightmare fuel for young players, and Caleb Williams goes out there, tosses for 340 yards, and gives them a chance. He looked exactly like what they thought they were getting, and now if he continues to hold that through the rest of the season, maybe the expectations will be more earned going into next year. I think the other guy, as we talk about former number 1 overall picks, Emerson, that I really was impressed by the last few games, really since he's been back after being benched, was Bryce Young, who took the now 2-time defending Super Bowl champs down to the wire yesterday and is playing for his job from here on out.
Yeah, for sure. And Kansas City has one of the top defenses in the NFL, and if it wasn't for Patrick Mahomes' clutch gene yesterday, Gojo, Young might have led the Panthers to a legit upset win over Kansas City. His head coach likes what he sees.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to make any statements. He's making it for himself. You know, he's continued to show us the progress we're looking for, bringing our skill players to life, you know. Xavier played the X position today, so just kudos to Xavier as well, just taking on a new role and finding some success there. You know, a couple plays he'd love to have back, I'm sure. He'll be the first to tell you. But, you know, talking about Bryce, you know, it's the coaching staff, it's his teammates. You know, he's showing us, you know, what he can do when he's out there.
So we can expect him to start next Sunday.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Gojo, I mean, going off that last question we just heard right there, Bryce Young's continued growth here shows why the Panthers should ride with him the rest of the year, does it not?
Oh, that to me is like the obvious one here. The question is now, though, Dad, if he continues to play like this, what a huge coup for the Panthers. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't go out and bring anyone into the quarterback room this offseason. There should absolutely be competition brought in for Bryce Young coming up this offseason, but he should be given the opportunity in a way that doesn't have them going out and spending resources either in the draft or for some marquee veteran free agent if he keeps playing like this in a year where we've talked about it's a little bit lesser of a quarterback class overall between the draft and free agency. This would be a coup for the Panthers to now get to spend time and money continuing to add resources back to a defense that they hemorrhaged talent from so they could go and spend the money to get him as a draft pick in the first place here. Bryce Young's turn in the back half of the season could change so much for a franchise that's been marred by turning over their high-end talent and their leaders in positions and in the coaching spots year after year.
Yeah, and they listen, they play strong defenses. They play Tampa Bay next, then they play the Eagles, then the Cowboys, the Cardinals, Tampa Bay again, and then finish in Atlanta. And I agree with everything you said. The key is they don't have to start, if they feel like he is the guy, they don't have to start the clock over. They don't have to use a high asset draft pick to take a quarterback and start over with a rookie quarterback 2 years in to the last high pick you took in Bryce Young. that would be monstrous. If you could actually concentrate on other parts of the team, that would be a huge success. So again, we talk about, sometimes sitting a quarterback. I never mind a high pick starting right away. As I said, I'm about getting your eyes watered, your nose bloodied. But if you need to take a step back during the season when they benched him, let him sit, let him catch his breath, because he has absolutely played better since he's come back. That's, we talked about like the Anthony Richardson, and we can get to him benching with the Colts to kind of take a step back, and now they go back to him. But Bryce Young is making the most of his opportunity, and I think where Carolina thought they were going to have to go quarterback in the draft, they have to be rethinking that and thinking, okay, we can build around more of the weak spots we have in this team and leave the quarterback position alone. I don't know if the decision's made already. They still have, 6 more games, 6 more tests for Bryce Young to see what he can do.
It shouldn't be made already. Bryce Young is going to have to stack a bunch of games like this. But if he does and maintains this level of play, where again, when we talked about with Caleb Williams, this was against the Kansas City Chiefs. This was against Steve Spagnuolo. This wasn't a bunch of slouches. And in this game, Bryce Young, who I thought the biggest knock on him was the way he would wilt under pressure against the blitz. Now, listen, part of this is the Carolina Panthers went out and spent on the offensive line, and they are getting their money's worth. I've referenced that yards before contact stat that's kind of indicative of offensive lines in the running game. Chuba Hubbard, who's been great and got that payday. The offensive line for the Carolina Panthers is 9th in yards before contact per rush right now. They've been paving ways and keeping Bryce Young relatively clean, but when it's gotten messy and when the Chiefs decided to blitz, 11 of 14 for 135 yards and a touchdown against the blitz was Bryce Young. He had the response ready to go. He had big plays to Adam Thielen ready to go. Daddy finally looks calm under fire. He's never going to have the physical ability to make some of the plays of a guy, even like Caleb Williams, who we just talked about there. But at the very least, it looks like the game is finally slowed down for him, and he can process and make the quick decisions under fire that were a hallmark of his game at Alabama and a reason why I thought he could have success in the NFL. So you're right. It's not a decision that needs to be made now or should be made right now. But if the arrow keeps going in this general direction, he could save the Carolina Panthers a lot of consternation this offseason and allow them to go and address that defense that, Dad, oh, by the way, talking about the Chiefs on the other side just briefly here, they're kind of on autopilot right now, it seems, right? They can win regular season games in their sleep. As soon as we saw them go up at the end of the game, the Carolina Panthers, with about a minute and change left, we knew this is the Tom Brady-ification of the NFL, where now it's Patrick Mahomes. You left him too much time, and he tightrope walks up the sideline. He gets them in range, and the rest is history for them to go win the game. But a concerning performance on the edge for the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes sacked, 5 times in this game by a defense that is 31st in the league in sack percentage, 31st in the league in pressure percentage. Shout out to Wanham for having a good game, but that is concerning again at the tackle spots for this Kansas City offense.
Yeah, that's obviously the weak spot is the edges for this offense. They're pretty set at guard and center. And even Patrick Mahomes said, I'd love to win by 3 touchdowns and not have to worry, about the end of the game. Because, you play like this, you're hanging over the cliff, and it takes one bad game or one bad or 2 bad plays in the playoffs and you're out. Right, all of a sudden you have a lot of what-ifs going on in the offseason. So, yeah, while they are obviously one of the best teams in the NFL, there are some concerns with the way they're playing.
Yeah, we know the clear Achilles heel for a couple of the AFC contenders, right? For the Kansas City Chiefs, it's tackle. For the Baltimore Ravens, it's the back end of that defense. And so far, they've been able to overcome it because you've got 2 of the biggest space alien former MVP quarterbacks that the NFL has to offer. But as the year goes on right now and the competition ramps up, it's going to be interesting to see how they go about addressing that in those critical moments, because I think the Chiefs are probably holding back a fair amount at this point in the season, especially now that they got the loss out of the way here. You're not having to worry about Mercury Morris and the Dolphins or anything that goes on there popping champagne anymore. So you get to just focus on playing football again. So lots to legislate there. But again, Caleb Williams and Bryce Young, the arrow pointing up for both of them. We'll talk about where the arrow points in the Harbaugh Bowl as Marshall Newhouse gets set to join us in hour number 2 and take a look at Monday Night Football coming up next here on GoJo Golic. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We'll talk at some point about Notre Dame versus the world right now. The football team's winning games. The women's basketball team's dropping top 5 teams like it's their job. I thought they might deserve a crowning moment here, but apparently the powers that be are afraid of Notre Dame propaganda. And so instead, we're going to do DraftKings crowning moments with Saquon Barkley, who is, all jokes aside, incredibly deserving of our love here after a record-setting performance, 255 yards on Sunday Night Football against the Rams. Prior to Week 12, Saquon was plus 4,000 to win MVP, and since that game, third in MVP odds behind Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Crowning Moments is presented by DraftKings. Submit your winning bets for a chance to be featured. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Hour number 2, Marshall Newhouse helps us preview Monday Night Football next. All right, hour number 2 here at GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Emerson Latzia here. We'll get to some college football. For as wild as the NFL felt on Sunday, Saturday across college football as the SEC meat grinder continued to chew up and spit out teams. You've got plenty of change amid the top of the sport. Indiana had their moment, had their shot against Ohio State, and unfortunately was not ready for the bright lights there. And so maybe the hopes and dreams of the Hoosier State fall on a team from South Bend, Indiana. We'll get to plenty of that going forward here. But Marshall Newhouse, proud former TCU Horned Frog and NFL offensive lineman, kind enough to join us here now. You're going to see him on the pregame Power Up, 6 o'clock Eastern every Monday and Thursday, helping you get ready for, in this case tonight, the Harbaugh between John Harbaugh and Jim Harbaugh, Chargers and Ravens out here in SoFi. Marshall, how you doing this morning, man?
I'm doing good. I'm just trying to figure out why TCU is catching so many strays this week from Nick Saban and Herbie and all these guys. I mean, 24-3 to Oklahoma. I don't know. 2022 TCU. They beat Michigan. They were deserving to be there in the national championship. We don't talk about it, but I don't understand. But things are working out how they should work out. I'm just saying.
Listen, you can get your ass kicked in the national championship and still absolutely deserve to be there. There is nothing wrong with that. And no, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. Don't write in the papers that I was mad. So there will be no Horned Frog slander on this show. I think you guys have one of the coolest symbols out there, by the way, with the little Horned Frog thing.
There's unashamedly the Horned Frog. You do the peace sign, you make it angry. Can we just not dispute that Georgia would have done that to anyone that year and move on, please?
Listen, I don't want to hear from anybody about TCU or about Notre Dame getting smoked in the playoffs. If you look at the BCS, you look at the 4-team playoff, normally a team got smoked, whether it was Notre Dame, whether it was TCU, whether it was somebody else. Some team got blown out. So I don't want to hear a word. You made it there. You deserve to be there.
Absolutely. So now we've got SEC teams with multiple losses. Listen, miss me with all the rest of that stuff, okay?
Oh, yeah. Yep. No, the press tour for 3-loss SEC teams getting into the dance is going to be robust this week. So everyone prepare for it. You thought we were done with the political ads after the election. No, no, no. The Southeastern Conference is going to be ready and raring to go with those bad boys leading up. But that'll be a story for another day. Marshall, before we get to Monday Night Football, let's start with what we saw last night. The Eagles went out there and I thought physically put it on the Chargers in a way that sent a big-time message. How close is the gap now between them and the Detroit Lions in the top of the NFC?
It's close and getting closer. Listen, Saquon went off. I mean, he showed his hold behind on national TV on Sunday Night Football. And if you look back at the most explosive plays, they weren't like crazily designed runs. There was stretch with a slice. It was counter. It was a slow screen out of the backfield. There was nothing wild about it. They were just whooping ass last night. If you can run that kind of offense with that behind that offensive line, and Jalen Hurts doesn't have to be miraculous, doesn't have to play out of his mind, which is good enough to do if you need him to. But if you can rely on Saquon like that, they're as dangerous of a team as in the NFC as it gets. Detroit took care of business like they've been doing all year, and so they're still the front runner. But Philly is right there. Now with San Francisco looking like they're falling out of favor just with injuries and things just not looking right this season. Give me Philly and Detroit in the NFC Championship. I wouldn't be mad at that at all.
So any way you think the 49ers, they lose 38-10 to the Packers, can get healthy enough to get back in this thing or no?
I've lost faith in that. I really had a lot of faith that they could kind of slowly put things back together, but Trent's not all the way there. If you watch Christian McCaffrey, he is just not himself. And can we be mad at him? That Achilles injury that feels like it was nearly being catastrophic, you just don't come back from that, even if you're him, in the same way as quickly as he did. Maybe they turn it on. There's something that I haven't seen, but you also you'll have your starting quarterback. Just too many things are out of place right now for them to really challenge.
What about the Miami Dolphins, Marshall? They're still under 500 at this point. They get a big win over the Patriots. And since Tua's come back, this has looked a lot more like a complete football team. With the AFC wildcard picture, is there any thought that they could be a team kind of like Buffalo, who came back from the dead last year and becomes that dreaded team no one wants to play?
Absolutely, yeah. They're offensively, no one wants to see them. I mean, Tua was such an important piece, and I think we lost track of how important he was for them. And Mike McDaniels struggled without him, and that again shows just Tua's value to that team. And they're trying to dispel the cold rumors next week against Green Bay. They go in there and beat Green Bay. They're already in the one spot out of the playoff picture in the AFC. Another one of these top AFC teams slips up, and they're right there. The fact that they were 2-6 and still in the hunt, we hadn't really seen a team in the position like that, but they were still there technically, statistically. And here they are creeping along. They seem to be kind of under the radar, which for a while they were not. Their defense is playing really solid football. They're a team that you don't want to mess with, especially unless you get them in a fair weather game, truly. And then if this week goes the way they hope it goes, they're trying to dispel those rumors, then they're dangerous in any environment.
Yeah, right now the third wild card team is Denver at 7-5, and Miami is 5-6, so just one in the loss column behind. How about a division leader in Houston? Seems like they're missing a gear right now. What's up with them?
Yeah, it's kind of odd, isn't it? CJ Stroud has taken a step back this year, a true sophomore slump. And I don't think it doesn't seem to be a glaring issue other than he's just missing a lot of normal throws that he normally makes, because he still has a few in his bag where he makes some incredible, deep out routes, some ball placement things over the middle. He's not getting a lot of help from his interior offensive line. They're kind of getting tossed around a little bit. And just generally, his control over the game that we got used to last year is not there. We used to think, okay, they're marching down the field. He is playing this, thing like a drum. And this year just hasn't been that. They've kind of just looked off. He had Nico Collins out for a while. Even with Nico Collins back in, they didn't look all that good. And then the defense as well. I mean, you allow Will Levis to kind of move up and down the field on you like that, then I start to have some questions. Yeah, they're still in the division lead and they have time to put it together because the rest of the division is so poor. But as far as challenging the AFC in the playoffs, they have a lot to prove to me moving forward.
Yeah, he's already been sacked one more time than last year. He has 4 more interceptions than all of last year, and he's still 9 fewer touchdowns than last year as well. So not him alone, but certainly, Mike, the team seems a bit off.
Yeah, I do think it's a testament to how building the house the right way matters for young quarterbacks here, and why we focus so much on the wiring for some of these guys when you start feeling that pressure bearing down on you a little more often than it did last year, and some of the uncharacteristic things it can force you into. Marshall, we talked about the Philadelphia side of things. We know a lot of people have also trained their eyes to East Rutherford, trying to see what the reaction is going to be like this morning around that Giants facility, knowing that Saquon Barkley, the player they let walk out of the door, has been going off and is on pace to break the single-season rushing record. But now you've got Dexter Lawrence and Malik Neighbors saying the team played soft. There's some people questioning the decisions of Brian Daboll, head coach around that building. You did a couple of years with the Giants. What's it going to be like for John Mara and company walking into work this morning with all of this hanging overhead?
Yeah, it's all fun and games when they're scrappy and maybe even eking out some wins to do the Danny DeVito gesture and have a lot of fun with it. But when you're getting whooped like that, there's not a lot to be happy about. And not to mention just the way they handled the Daniel Jones situation, the way that this offseason they handled the Saquon Barkley situation, the calls coming from inside the house. There's just multiple points of failure for a team, a historic organization, which I have a lot of respect for. I have a lot of respect for the Mayer family as well. Yeah, I think they undercalculated how much Saquon meant, which I think a lot of people did. I'm hoping we have this conversation in the offseason about, yes, the value of aging running backs has flipped and diminished, but we swung the pendulum way too far with the way that Derrick Henry's playing, now Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley. There are outliers in every scenario, and we just discredited the outliers. Like, these guys are freaks. 26, 27, be damned. The statistical drop-off that we relied on analytics to tell us about running backs doesn't apply to everybody. And so they misread it as much as anyone in the league. And then just structurally inside, it just not feel like the players have the confidence of the coaching staff. And the coaching staff doesn't have the confidence of the GMs in the front office. And there's a lot of points of disconnection, which start to erode really quickly, as you can see. A team that we thought could take another step forward because they had chosen their quarterback. They had chosen the horse they were going to ride on, and that horse had a gimpy leg. And then everything else, as you see, falls apart. You've got rookies chewing gum as loud as I've ever heard, doing press conferences and then not sounding too confident in their team. And then your best player in Dexter Lawrence, not happy with the performance on the field. So I don't know what's going to take to right the ship at this point. There's a lot of points of failure in the Giants organization.
Yeah, you mentioned Daniel Jones asking for and receiving his release over the weekend. His future now going to be with a different team. And I thought it was telling Malik Neighbors taking up for him and saying, you can see now it wasn't just the quarterback here, as what felt like a very clear shot at Brian Daboll and a coaching staff that I have a feeling aren't going to work here all that much longer based on the way that this is going for the Giants now. So, all right, Marshall, let's turn the page. We got Monday Night Football, which we expect to be, if nothing else, insanely physical, quirky, and with probably some wonderful brotherly hugs in here. What are you most looking forward to as we get Baltimore versus the Chargers in the Harbaugh?
Yeah, I love the energy that the Harbaughs bring. Every time they face each other, it's just a really physical match, as you alluded to. I'm happy to see the Chargers in primetime and see what they're really made of. They've kind of been under the radar as far as primetime games this year. They don't have a ton of stars, as they got rid of a lot of them in the receiving core. And so they've just been winning with defense and running the ball. Justin Herbert has had to make less flashy plays. He can still make them. He's still, if you look at his tape, he's making some of the best throws in the league. And so I'm excited for their offense to be tested. The Ravens are good on the secondary, but their run defense is putrid. I imagine the Chargers are going to run a whole lot of football. And then that'll lead to some play action shots from Justin Herbert. And then to see what Lamar Jackson has after kind of stumbling against Pittsburgh. Is that formula that Pittsburgh put ahead repeatable? A lot of man in your face coverage, making him make tight window throws, and then rushing the passer, keeping him contained in the pocket. Is that something that other teams can repeat in the same way that Pittsburgh did? So a lot on the line for AFC seeding as well. And so it looks like a toss-up. Baltimore favored by 3 in LA. It's going to be a good one, though.
Yeah, I mean, Baltimore dead last in pass defense, giving up so many big-time plays. But do the Chargers have, obviously out of Quentin Johnston, I mean, I don't know if they have any other deep ball threat, so that part of the game may be muted for them.
Hey, put some respect on Ladd McConkey's name right now. I understand that, man, when you see him out on the field, may not look the part necessarily, and I understand he's not going to take the top off anyone, but as productive a young receiver as we've seen so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, they're truly game planning for him. Other teams are finding Ladd and basically saying, don't let this guy get open, and he's continuing to get open, especially against man. He's been a revelation for them. They've got Quentin Johnston, who's also a speed threat. And so they've got weapons enough, but they're not just chucking the ball every play. So they're trying to have a balanced offense. I think Jim Harbaugh has respect for those levels of physicality that have to be imposed to then throw the ball more often in their offense. And so it's a winning formula so far. Jason Minner on the defensive side playing complementary football. And I think that's what they like to play. I think in years past, even with the defensive coach at Brandon Staley, they didn't seem balanced as an offense or as a team, excuse me. And so I think they're trying to play balanced football, but physical before anything else.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. You mentioned the primetime performances in this game. Dad had the Chargers against the Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday Night Football, where they were able to weather the second half storm. I thought Greg Roman's play calling got a little bit stale there, but they managed to step up there. They're going up against a different force entirely in this game, though. Lamar Jackson has been Mr. Monday Night Football, 6-2 on Monday Night Football in his career with 20 touchdowns and no interceptions. So you guys check Marshall out later on the pregame power-up. I might even make a quick appearance in there for a time or two. Marshall, we always appreciate the time, brother. Thank you.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Thanks, Marshall.
And see, we got him out there on a little bit of Horned Frog love with the Quentin Johnston love. He's been great so far this season after people left him behind on the road, Dad, after last year. So Horned Frog love, it's a powerful thing.
And Horned Frog love in the playoffs as well. I stand by that.
Absolutely. Let's see who else is going to punch their ticket potentially to the playoff next on GoJo and Golic. College football had itself a time this weekend. We've spent a lot of time wailing and gnashing our teeth about what's going to happen with the CFP committee every Tuesday. This might be the most interested that I've been coming off a weekend where we saw multiple SEC contenders, Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M notch deeply troubling losses for their squads. Indiana, Dad, the game that I think most people had circled on the weekend, and what I thought was going to be the clearest answer in terms of, well, Indiana had a weak strength of schedule that everyone had talked about in triple digits in terms of strength of schedule on the season, and they had their one truly difficult test on the road in Columbus against Ohio State, and it went super poorly outside of the opening drive where Indiana on defense was able to hold Ohio State and then offensively was able to move the ball downfield. It did not look close. I've loved Indiana as much as anyone this college football season in terms of how well coached they are and how hard they play. That was not a close game. They got their asses kicked. Period. End of sentence. And so now I thought it was going to be as easy as, hey, could we see them drop to the back end of the top 12 here? Are they at risk of anything beyond that? But with Ole Miss deciding to do what they did against Florida, Dad, it feels like Indiana's still going to be comfortably in the field to go along with the rest of the Big Ten powers here.
I was going to say that we have questions at the SEC. We know Georgia's in the SEC title game. Who will they face, Texas or Texas A&M? We know the Big Ten is basically set unless Ohio State loses to Michigan, then Penn State could be in. Big 12 is a friggin' mess about what's going on there. That's another conference that has gone crazy. But the big question was going to be, we thought was kind of the least of the options. There was Indiana winning, there was Indiana losing close, and there was Indiana losing big. And Indiana lost big. They didn't seem like they were in this game. They had the 106th ranked schedule coming into the game. They had their one test, and they failed. And obviously Cignetti, their coach, when asked about whether they should be in the playoffs, basically was offended by that and think they absolutely should. AP rankings came out. They have them number 10, but of course AP doesn't matter. But I agree with you, because of the other losses, especially by the SEC teams getting their third losses, that may have kept Indiana in it. That may have been enough to keep them in it, because I thought after that bad loss, they were going to be on the outside looking in.
Yeah, and listen, I understand people on Indiana side are going to point to, you have a botched punt, special teams plays, throwing things out of whack here. Curtis Rourke passed for 68 yards in this game. The guy that had been the star quarterback for this team and an offense that had been the strength of this team to go along with the defensive pass rush here were completely blanked in this game by a much more talented Ohio State squad. And I don't even think it was as simple as they got out-athleted all over the field. They just got beat. This never felt close. It was a late touchdown that even got Indiana to 15 to begin with. And so I think, again, they'll still be in it, but this certainly takes a hit to the conversation about once they get there, can anything be expected? And for the crowd in the Southeastern Conference, Dad, that believes some of these three-loss teams that have big-time wins, right? When you look at Ole Miss and Georgia and these other teams that have been in the 2- and 3-loss range for a little while, but have marquee wins over highly ranked opponents, they can at least point to that in terms of, hey, we're capable of top-end success, just inconsistent enough in a tough conference to have a couple of losses in there. This doesn't help the argument for an Indiana or the Big Ten at large.
No, it definitely does not. I think the SEC team that just kind of quietly is going to be in good spot is Tennessee. Tennessee played UTEP, beat them 56-0. Now, they certainly don't have a gimme in Vandy for the last game, but they're sitting there. They'll be sitting there in the 6, 7, 8 slot with 2 losses, not in the SEC championship game. So I actually think Tennessee is solidly in the playoff. We'll see at Georgia. They're going to play Texas A&M, who lost their game to Auburn in overtime. So I think Tennessee and they're a 2-loss team. I don't know if a 3-loss team will get in. It'll be either Bama or Ole Miss, right? Possibly Georgia if they lose in the SEC championship game to probably Texas. But I think Tennessee, they don't have to worry about a championship game to get a third loss, to get knocked out. They're just flying under the radar and going to be in the playoffs.
Tennessee could be that team that Lane Kiffin, who came out with the comments last week that there are some coaches in the SEC who don't want to play in the conference championship game, who think that all you're doing is exposing yourself to risk. I think that was a clever media push by the people in the SEC to make sure that making the conference championship is seen as a reward by the committee in this latest iteration of the sport. But that being said, I do think Tennessee, Dad, I agree with you, is in that sweet spot where they've been just good enough and won enough of the big games to now sit idly by on the sideline and watch everything happen around them and not have to worry about it really one bit. There are a couple of things that'll get interesting, and we can spend more time on this tomorrow heading into the committee's rankings. But in the AP poll that you referenced that came out yesterday, SMU moves up to 9th. You've got Miami ahead of them at the 8 spot, and then Clemson working their way into the back door at the 12 spot right now. Now, again, that doesn't buy you anything because we know it's the 5 highest ranked conference champions. It gets the auto bids. It messes with the math some, but how many teams the ACC now gets based on what's gone on with the math here is going to become, I think, an interesting side quest while the SEC pushes to have more teams. And then, Dad, there's our alma mater in Notre Dame, who I finally feel like now after the Army game, which was the last ranked team on their schedule, Notre Dame will be on the road against Southern Cal. That's obviously had a massive fall from grace in this last season under Lincoln Riley. But they're a team that controls their own destiny. If they win against USC, they're going to be in the playoff. But, Dad, is it time to now start having the conversation about what opportunity Notre Dame has once they get there based off what they've done since that Northern Illinois loss?
Yeah, because the thought on Notre Dame, and it's not just this year or last year, when last year they lost to Marshall, this year to NIU. It had been gone back to your years and Charlie Weiss years, and even some of Brian Kelly's games where Notre Dame would play down to their opponents, right? I mean, that happened. But after the NIU loss, Notre Dame basically has had one-score game. And that was Louisville, 31-24. Every other game has been basically a blowout. Not basically, has been a blowout. Notre Dame's defense is easily one of the best in the country. And Al Golden is just doing an incredible job because they've had major players with injuries leave. A couple of D linemen and edge guys, Benjamin Morrison, possibly the best cornerback coming out in the draft. If he now does come out, or if he goes back, we'll have to wait and see because of the injury. And they're still, I mean, I think they have 26 takeaways or more. I mean, it's been incredible the way they played. And Riley Leonard, the big thing had been, could Notre Dame do anything in the playoffs without a passing game because they hadn't shown a passing game. Well, now they are showing a passing game. Riley Leonard, very comfortable in the Mike Denbrock offense now, throwing the ball. The passing game is really come along incredibly well because you know they had a running game. They're stocked at running back, including Riley Leonard. The O-line is kind of getting in stride. It was such an inexperienced line, but now they've gelled together. So they are absolutely, and I think the biggest reason, first off, well, we knew the defense was going to be great, and they have lived up to it. I think because the offensive line has gelled and Riley Leonard in the passing game has really taken exponentially steps forward, I definitely think they are someone to be reckoned with in the playoffs.
During this win streak for Notre Dame, which is now at 9 games, they've outscored their opponents 385-92. During that stretch, basically a 35-point margin of victory in every game here. They haven't played in a one-score game since September 28th against Louisville. And, Dad, I think for Notre Dame this year, this is as good of an opportunity as they've had to not only get to the playoff, but win playoff games that they've had in the playoff era because there's no truly great team in college football this year. I don't think this is the best Notre Dame team that we've seen in the last decade or so, but I think they've got a championship caliber defense. And just quite honestly, like our 2012 team, this was the formula. Right. Is you had one of the top defenses in college football and an offense that was just timely enough that worked off a lot of the turnovers. Manti Te'o had 7 interceptions that year. The defense this year forces them left and right, doing it against teams like Army and Navy where that's not a characteristic for them, and yet Notre Dame stresses them because of the talent and depth on that side of the football to make things happen. And so in lieu of a truly great championship contender this year, Dad. And when you look at some of the issues that Georgia, Ohio State, and company have had because of injury on the offensive line, matchup-wise, I think if you're Notre Dame, this is your best opportunity to actually start thinking about a trophy in a long time. It's still been a while since they've played anyone of value, and I think that matters. We saw that with Indiana, where the jump up in competition is going to be more stark for Notre Dame because they haven't played anyone truly great in a while, but they've also gone out and executed to a standard that should be a huge feather in the cap for Marcus Freeman in a big year, Dad. We knew what was on the line. This was supposed to be make the playoff in year 3, and we're seeing for Brian Kelly down at LSU, for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, that's not as easy as you make it out to be, and yet that's exactly where they've got the opportunity to be, Emerson, if they go and get this win next weekend against SC.
You guys nervous about them not having a kicking game? Because come playoff time, you're going to need, like, a field goal is going to play a vital role in winning those games. That would make me a little nervous.
Dad, it certainly does. Mitch Jeter, who was brought in to be their starting kicker, has been injured a bunch in the middle of the season, and so the backups have not fared great. I mean, again, not to draw too many comparisons, but in my time at Notre Dame, the kicking situation got so dire, we held tryouts on campus for the inter-hall football teams, and David Ruffer, who ended up becoming our starting kicker and becoming a finalist for, is it the Groza Award?
Lou Groza. Lou Groza. Lou Groza.
He was a Lou Groza Award finalist when it was all said and done there, and so we had to go that route there. Again, I think if Mitch Jeter gets healthy, they should be okay, but that is an area of legitimate concern, as is, Dad, if Notre Dame has to play a game where their defense doesn't go over the top and force a bunch of turnovers and give the offense a short field. Jeremiah Love has been excellent, and if you're an NFL fan looking for the next Notre Dame running back to join Kyron Williams and Audric Estime, the best athlete of the bunch is wearing 4 in South Bend right now. They have not had a guy that moves like this in the backfield there in I don't know how long. So he is legitimately special, and the offensive line has overcome injury and got a bunch of experience, but it's still been the defense handing them favorable field position more often than not.
Yeah, you mentioned Mitch Jeter. He came back from injury, but he missed. He was 0 for 2 in field goals against Army. So, Emerson, it's a legitimate concern. And, if the defense has an off game, it's like your national championship game. The defense for your team, led by Manti Te'o, came in as the best defense in football, and Alabama just ran all over them. They did not have a good game. Alabama had a great offensive game, and the offense couldn't cover the difference. So that's kind of the way Notre Dame is playing now. The defense has to create turnovers and has to play well. Though, like I said, the passing game has improved for Notre Dame. But when they step up in competition in the playoffs, will that passing game be able to step up as well?
Well, and this is going to be the conversation, too, about paths to all of this that involves that conference championship stuff that came up before, because while you don't get the first round bye unless you win a conference championship and are one of the 4 highest ranked conference champions, you are in line to host a game. And if you're Notre Dame or if you're Tennessee, you're also in line to not have to play another game on conference championship weekend. And for Notre Dame, where Kingston Viliamu-Asa went out with an injury against Army this last season, a knee sprain that they're hoping is not too serious. Howard Cross, their star defensive tackle, last year All-American, been dealing with an ankle injury the last couple of games. If you get a little bit of extra time not playing on conference championship weekend with your position secure to get healthy, ratchet that up before the playoff gets going, and oh, by the way, then you potentially host a first-round playoff game, Dad, you're talking about advantages in the margins that I think are going to be so key in a playoff where depth and health are this year, because there's no dominant team, going to probably be the factors above all else that decide who the champion is.
Yep, without a doubt. And what a weekend it was. Again, we saw Indiana lose, Alabama lose, Ole Miss lose, Texas A&M lose, BYU lose, Colorado lose. I mean, the Big 12 now, what is it, entering week 14, 9 teams still in contention for the championship game. I mean, it's unreal what's going on, and Colorado control their own destiny. And as their coach Deion Sanders said, they had the wrong odor they were smelling, right?
Guys, wasn't it odd to see Colorado play their worst game of the season when the stakes were that high?
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean, the defense as much as they had improved, still not an otherworldly run defense. And Kansas just hit it at the right time. Kansas and Florida both found the super serum again in time to ruin a couple of seasons for other teams out there eyeing the playoff there potentially. And so now all eyes in the Big 12 on the Valley and Kenny Dillingham. They got a little early with the field rush there, but ultimately still got a big-time win against BYU, and now they control their own destiny heading towards the finish line here. Coming up next, though, let's talk about destiny of one former top pick at quarterback. Where does Daniel Jones wind up next? All right, we talked about it earlier. It's been a hard day to be a New York Giants fan. You got to watch Saquon Barkley out there glowing up and living his best life on Sunday Night Football. Shout out to Saquon, by the way, who amidst all of the rallied cries around his MVP candidacy took to Twitter to say, how about them boys up front? The Eagles' offensive line for MVP will continue to be the banner that I champion going forward here. But the misery in New York, we know, is twofold, Dad, because not only have they had to watch Saquon Barkley be successful, but the guy that they planted their flag on instead. Remember, they had the decision coming off their playoff run in Brian Daboll's first year to pay one of two guys, and they chose to pay their quarterback, Daniel Jones, instead of their running back, Saquon Barkley. And now Daniel Jones, who was benched, as we know, had an injury guarantee in his contract that made that the prudent financial move, even though Joe Schoen and company wanted to call it a football move. Daniel asked for his release and was granted it. And so now we're going to see him on the move. The Giants, after the release, put out a statement that said, Daniel's been a great representative of our organization, first class in every way. Handling of this situation yesterday exemplifies just that. We are all disappointed with how things worked out. So, Dad, what do you think is next for Daniel Jones now in terms of where he might land this season and what that means for his career beyond it?
Well, I mean, I think, and first off, player after player, even before this blowout loss, had talked about how they thought Daniel Jones wasn't the problem, how he's been a great teammate, and then certainly after the loss, Malik Neighbors, in a tough to understand presser because of his gum chewing and moving away from the microphones, talked about how you could see it wasn't the quarterback. It wasn't just the quarterback. The players loved Daniel Jones. So the quest for Daniel Jones is, for the rest of this year, does he back up a playoff team? Is he a backup for the Cardinals, for the Broncos, for the Chargers, for the Vikings? Does he go and does he back up one of those teams while they make a run, while still giving him the flexibility next year to be with another team? Do you rent him for the rest of the year as a secure backup to make a playoff run? And he's got to be thinking, okay, he wants to be a starter somewhere, and there are plenty of teams out there. Is he a guy, say the Raiders take him, and then don't have to now, instead of going after a young quarterback in the draft, you now are putting all your eggs in the Daniel Jones basket when he supposedly failed in New York. Listen, he was 22 and 44, 70 touchdowns, 47 interceptions. He looked really good sometimes and he looked really bad sometimes. But does another team, forgetting the going to a playoff caliber team as a backup, as insurance this year, his future going to be with a team that will then, not pick a quarterback high in the draft and say Daniel Jones is our quarterback?
It's such a tough bit of math to do, Dad, because we know there are only 32 of these jobs. They're very hard to come by. But that being said, because Daniel Jones has started so many games, like, rare has it been that we get a quarterback who gets this much time to show a team and prove to them whether or not he's the guy, as we have with Daniel Jones. And so I don't feel like taking a job that could be right there available for him right now. I mean, we saw Gardner Minshew, unfortunately, broke his collarbone and is going to be out for the rest of the year. And so the Raiders are on their third quarterback of the season and could absolutely use Daniel Jones. I'm sure his phone's been ringing off the hook coming out from that area code. But if you're Daniel Jones and you're now trying to figure out, all right, I've played a ton of football and I've got a ton of tape, but I need to start thinking about my future in a different way. Right. Is it going the route that we've seen for others of, let me go to a competent organization that's in a good place right now roster-wise, where I can be away from the limelight and the discussion a little bit. I can sort of reset and take a breath like we've talked about for a couple of these quarterbacks that have been benched this season, and then try and go through that reputational car wash that we've seen a guy like Sam Darnold, who was a top overall pick in New York, do in the past. We saw Mitch Trubisky do that in Buffalo and get another opportunity in Pittsburgh after that a few years ago. And so I think, Dad, ultimately that would probably be the more prudent route long term for Daniel Jones, even if it's scary in the short term to say no to an opportunity like Las Vegas that could lead to more direct time on the field sooner.
I think it depends on how many teams need a quarterback and how many quarterbacks are really valued as first-round quarterbacks. We just had Matt Miller on, and he had 4 in the first round, 2 close to the top, and then 1 in the middle and 1 at the end at like pick 28, I think. So I think that's what we're looking at. What teams are looking at a quarterback, and does that does that exceed the number of actual first-round take near the top quarterbacks? Because we know quarterbacks are overvalued and drafted higher than they should, but maybe Daniel Jones gives you the option to not overvalue a college quarterback and take him higher than you should and say, we'll go with Daniel Jones instead, where the fan base will say, well, wait a minute, he's a failed quarterback as a top pick with the Giants, and now he's going to be our starter. I don't think Daniel Jones wants to go through the Sam Darnold back up for a year, kind of catch your breath, and then I think he's ready to go be a starter somewhere now. And I think there will be a couple of teams out there that would rather to do the Daniel Jones second chance experiment than take a rookie quarterback.
That's the one thing I'm actually not comfortable saying. I don't know what Daniel Jones wants or is comfortable with next year in terms of that experience. Because, again, the reports that we're getting now from Adam Schefter is that the Baltimore Ravens and the Vikings are the 2 likeliest team to land Daniel Jones per sources. They are hardly the only ones, but Jones wants to sign with a playoff contender. And so that, to me, indicates maybe a different priority right away. Because, again, there are teams where I'm sure the opportunity to play sooner could absolutely present themselves on a bad squad. If you wanted to go to a bottom feeder and play, I'd imagine there'd be chances for him given how unique the circumstances are here. And so him wanting to go and be a part of a contender, Dad, to me at least opens up the possibility that we don't know exactly how this guy is going to go and legislate his future here going forward.
I think he's looking at the best of both worlds now. I think he could finish this year with a playoff contender, and then next year, instead of going to a team right now and learning an offense quick and playing in the last few games and maybe get beaten up, is to wait a year, get a full offseason with a team that's not very good. But while you're doing that, you can finish this year with a contender.
Well, and there's also the idea that right now, if you go to a bottom feeder where you can play, you also risk being there for a staff that's going to get shown the door. And there are plenty that we talked about here. I'm not sure the Las Vegas Raiders, how safe Antonio Pierce's job is going forward here. There are a number of places that if you were looking at those teams in that vein that are going to be picking high in the draft, you're not exactly sure about job security. And why would you want to go in there, learn an offense in a building that's not going to be here this time next year as you try and ingratiate yourself to the locals? So for him, it prompts those questions about his future, where you and I had the debate before Bryce Young started going off the way he has since being reinserted into the lineup about who would be an option with more upside going into the offseason if you were a team looking to make that push. And with Daniel Jones, Dad, it's simultaneously the problem of he represents the archetype of a toolsy player, a guy who's big, strong, fast, tons of ability, but also one who at this point we've got tons of tape on. It's not like those prospects like Mitch Trubisky coming out of college where, well, he's only started a handful of games, but he's got all this ability, and so we can mold him into something. Daniel Jones is a veteran NFL quarterback now, and so how much more are you really going to be able to change about him? And we're kind of seeing that grand experiment play out with Sam Darnold right now in Minnesota. Right. And Sam Darnold, the guy I think most people saw as infinitely more talented than Daniel Jones coming out of the draft way back in the day. And so I really still don't know where we sit, Dad. He's going to be a guy that has a job either as a backup or potentially a starter next year. But what that can net you at this point in his career, I think is fascinating because, again, we don't get guys that last as long with one team and get as many chances as he did.
You seem to know his ceiling, and that's the one thing with rookies as we go on the P word of potential of where their ceiling is. But quite honestly, you look at it, how many teams need a quarterback? I think the Jets will be looking for a quarterback. The Browns will be looking for the quarterback. Will Tennessee with Will Levis? I don't know. The Raiders will be looking for a quarterback. Take the Giants out of it because they released him. And then who else is really going to be looking for a quarterback if Bryce Young is saving his job? There might just be 3 or 4 where they're looking to draft quarterbacks high.
Yeah, and if you're Daniel Jones, it is, hey, do you want to take advantage of the fact that there's a weaker quarterback class coming out next year, or do you go the healthier route, go with a better organization, get some time to heal, and then risk being up against a quarterback class in 2 years that we know nothing about right now? So much on the line for his future. Coming up next, we'll finish off the show with this, that, and the third, though, here on GoJo and Golic. All right, let's finish up the show. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you to the rest of the day. Download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday right here on the DraftKings Network, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, GoJo and Golic on YouTube as well. And if you missed the show live or any of our great guests, shout out to Marshall Newhouse, former NFL offensive tackle, proud TCU Horned Frog alum, and one of the co-hosts of the pregame power-up on DKN at 6 o'clock Eastern. Check that out wherever you get our podcast or right here as soon as we get done on YouTube. Guys, let's start off with this. The world of women's college basketball got a nice shakeup this weekend here. A couple of big-time matchups went on over in the sport. Most notably, for some people, top-ranked South Carolina loses to UCLA in a big-time defeat there. Dawn Staley's bunch beat 77-62 by 5th-ranked UCLA in a top-5 matchup, although, Dad, really not the matchup that we care about nearly as much as what Niele Ivey and the Notre Dame women did to that USC squad here, blanking Juju Watkins, the heralded star player, is a sophomore now for the Trojans, getting absolutely rocked by Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo and them girls from South Bend here. Niele has got them cooking. That is a title contender right now. You knew it before the season. They've put it on wax ever since the ball got rolled out on the court. Now what? Let's go.
Two excellent ranked matchups, USC and Notre Dame, South Carolina and UCLA. UCLA was number 5. They're still undefeated. But, yeah, Notre Dame, you thought getting the injuries coming back that this was going to be their best shot at a title starting this year for Niele Ivey, and certainly it is living up to that. But for South Carolina, they had an overall 43-game winning streak broken, a 33-game consecutive road win streak broken. For UCLA, it's the first time they beat a number 1 team. They were 0-20. South Carolina trailed at double digits at halftime for the first time since December of 21. I mean, it just shows you how dominant South Carolina had been leading up to this, and they're still obviously going to be a team to be reckoned with, but kudos to UCLA. But as you mentioned, Notre Dame will eventually be the top team in women's college basketball.
Hey, you want to know how you go about doing that is absolutely strapping up. Shout out to Sonia Citron doing a great job defensively against Juju Watkins here, who went out here, still had a decent night here, 24 points, but 0 of 5 from beyond the three-point arc here. Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles, both big games. Olivia Miles, 20 points. Hannah Hidalgo, 24. So very excited to ride this wave with the team this year. Feeling like 2018 again, and I can't wait. I promise you, I'm always cautiously optimistic with the football team, Dad, because you and I have both been a part of this. We understand the landscape of college football. Notre Dame women's basketball, though, we've been bout it for a long time around South Bend. And the transition of power from Muffet McGraw to Niele Ivey now fully complete as they're back with their full backcourt complement here. Olivia Miles, who missed all of last year, recovering from the knee injury here. This thing is locked and ready to rock, and I will be the first one banging the drum all along the way on this bandwagon.
Listen, Hannah Hidalgo, like Juju Watkins, came onto the scene as freshmen last year, and they just were both incredibly great players right out of the gate. But Notre Dame getting Olivia Miles back from the knee injury has been so big. You just talk about her and Hannah together and what they're going to do and the possible recruiting classes going forward with Notre Dame as they are set for a bit. Niele Ivey has got herself a squad.
No doubt about it. So, all right, let's stick with the round ball, Emerson, and get to that. What do we got up next?
All right, Scottie Pippen Jr., son of Hall of Famer Scottie Pippen, has been making a name for himself this season with the Grizzlies. And guess what he did Saturday night? Decided to put up a career-high 30 points on the Bulls. Yes, the team with whom his father won 6 NBA championships. And the fact that the game was played at the United Center, where the elder Pippen had so many memorable performances, made it even more special. Wow.
Yeah, Dad, cannot imagine the emotions going through him of being in a place where that family has so many memories to then go out and accomplish that level. And already, I mean, listen, to have a career night like that as a player trying to make your way in the NBA and continue to do the things on his own is great. But to know the ties that building in particular is pretty insane.
Yeah, I mean, for a guy's averaging just under 13 points a game, trying to make his own mark in the league, just like some of the other great, like Bronny Jr., who's playing obviously in the G League. But when you follow a father that is such a star, one of the greatest top 50 players of all time in Scottie Pippen, I mean, it's some big shoes to fill to try and carve your own niche into the league, and big night for him.
You know what he needs to do if he really wants to make headlines? He needs to pull a Marcus Jordan here and then go date one of MJ's ex-wives. You know how Marcus did that?
There you go. That is
Larsa?
career and PR advice, courtesy of Emerson Latzia. You get that for free this time. Next time, it's going to cost you.
Yep.
So I would take
just
the
like my
goods
feet picks
while you can get it there. Although, Dad, apparently this could be a great sign for Bronny, considering where you look at Scottie Pippen Jr. and where he got his start with the Los Angeles Lakers and then playing with the South Bay Lakers, when we know Bronny's only playing home games right now. So maybe it takes a little bit longer than the couple of years that Scottie Pippen Jr. was there, but could still ultimately be the same path. Great developmental pipeline for sons of all-time great NBA players.
Well, I mean, again, that's where you get the reps. That's where you get the improvement. I still don't understand why Bronny's not playing away games. If it's the travel, you can miss me with that. I just don't get the development means you need to play. You need to get reps. So I will never understand that one.
Some making an argument, by the way, for most improved player for Scottie Pippen Jr., which is plus 6,000 on DraftKings Sportsbook, if that piques your interest.
Also, a very interesting question posed by our producer, Alan Yates, is can you be a junior if you spell your first name differently than your dad? Scottie Pippen Sr. is the IE variety, while Scottie Pippen Jr. is of the Y varietal here. Now, I know I always have questions, and I had to do a lot of learning about the second phenomenon, where supposedly the rule I've heard is if you are a second, it means that you have the same name as a grandfather. It skipped a generation in between having that same namesake here. But for the juniors, as a card-carrying junior myself, I am curious how we go about this. We're going to have to bring this up in the next meeting.
We're two juniors, dude. You and me both, bro. I get it.
I didn't know you were a junior.
Yeah, I'm Emerson Matthew
I didn't know
Latzia
you were a
Jr.
junior either.
Yeah, well, you guys really don't know me then.
No, and thank God we don't. I don't know all the rules. I guess I don't know all the rules of a junior, because your name is exactly what my name is, and now that we're in the same business, that was a mistake with travel and hotel rooms. We certainly have found out some of the miscues there. But yeah, I thought it had to be exactly the same name. And I know you keep wishing during the ESPN years that they would make a mistake and you'd get one of my checks.
That's the thing. Is like it got me a couple of first-class seats that I shouldn't have gotten as they're booking them, because they saw your name and your account on there. But just once during the prime years at the end of Mike and Mike, could payroll have not made that mistake for me one time and just helped a dude out here again, though? We'll be interested. We'll go to the ruling on that one and find out. Emerson, we got a couple of minutes left here. Let's get to cheese theft in the third.
Yeah, so it was last month, guys, where you had some thieves with a nose for fine cheese pulling off a massive cheddar ripoff in London. Dude, these thieves stole more than 49,000 pounds of award-winning cheddar worth nearly $400,000. Yeah, the company eventually realized it was gone, and there's finally been an arrest made, a 63-year-old man in connection with this cheese heist of 2024. At 63, there's no way your body could easily process all of that cheese. There's no way. You'd be backed up for weeks.
I mean, there's no way as a 35-year-old I could process 950 wheels of cheese without evacuating my insides in a way that would put the entire neighborhood at risk.
Pooping a brick. That'd hurt.
I love how this is tens of thousands of pounds of high-value cheddar. He didn't steal the cheap stuff. It was high-value cheddar, and obviously he's not eating it, but who knew there was a black market for high-value cheddar?
It's a black market for everything, dude.
Obviously there is.
Everything. 950 wheels. Imagine, like, walking in the alley behind the building, you just see dudes just, like a 63-year-old man wheeling all of these cheese wheels out.
I got a half a wheel for you.
I don't know if it's quite fit for a whole heist movie, but at the very least, an SNL special. 950 wheels of cheese, also what Jesse just calls the pantry.
Make it a musical. Make it a musical, and I'll see it.
Oh, God.
Emerson will see it. You guys can review it and our show. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.